So what are your thoughts, Carol?
Well, certainly Mr. Campbell did the right thing today. I think it was inevitable that he was going to step down. While the timing was a bit of a surprise today, I certainly believe he did the right thing. It's important when someone's given 24 years of service to the public, both as mayor and as opposition leader and as premier, to thank them for their years of service and to thank their family. We all know the sacrifices that families give up when someone is involved in political life, so I think it's important to offer my thanks to Mr. Campbell and to his family for their years of service to the province. None of this, though, takes away from the BC Liberal record. None of this takes away from what we've seen this province become under the BC Liberals, which is a more divided British Columbia. I'm very concerned about the delay of having a leader in place, a premier in place, because we know the kind of uncertainty that that will create in British Columbia. And we've seen a lot of uncertainty over this last year with the chaos of the BC Liberals. We've seen it when it comes to the economy. We've seen it in the lack of ideas that they have. So I certainly hope they get on with putting someone in place, because there are a lot of big issues that need to be addressed in this province, everything from the HST to the BC rail corruption issue and the questions that are unanswered, to kickstarting our economy, to providing support for seniors, dealing with child poverty. None of those issues have been dealt with, and I'm concerned now that we've got a delay. So I'll make sure that we're representing those issues and carrying that voice, and I'll be watching to make sure, as I said, that those issues get on the table despite the chaos that the Liberals may go through in their leadership race.
What was the straw that broke the camel's back here? Because a week ago he sounded like a premier that was going to be sticking around with the reorganization of his office, the televised speech and the tax cut. What do you think finally pushed him over the edge?
Well, I think only Mr. Campbell can answer that, but I certainly expect that he thought that he would get more support with his cabinet shuffle. I think he expected that he would get more support with his televised address and with his tax cut. But what's so clear is that they've lost trust with the people of British Columbia, and that doesn't sit with Mr. Campbell. That sits with all of the BC Liberals. So I expect they'll try and change things with putting a new leader in place, but let's remember their record speaks for itself. The public knows that. They've lost trust in them, and that's not going to change depending on who they put in place.
Gordon Campbell would have been the best possible opponent for any opposition leader to face in any election. What do you think this does to your chances? You'd much rather go up against Campbell than anyone else that they produce, would you not?
I'm ready for whoever they put up. I've said all along that I expected that the Premier would step down. I don't think it was any surprise to anyone that Mr. Campbell was going to step out before the next election. I don't think there's anyone in this province who would be surprised at that. So I expect that I'd be coming up against someone else in this next election. And as I said, it doesn't matter whether it's Mr. Campbell or whether it's another leader. The BC Liberals' record speaks for itself. Every one of those BC Liberals stood up when it came to the HST and supported bringing it in without any consultation, without telling the public the truth. All of those BC Liberals have stood up and said no to an increase in the minimum wage, to actually doing the kinds of things that need to be done for the environment and climate change in British Columbia. So they can change leaders, it's not going to change the record that they have.
What if they bring in someone who is not part of caucus right now, a Diane Watts or a John Furlong or anybody else? Does that not give them some distance between the HST?
Oh, I think they'll try. I have no doubt that they're out there looking for someone from the outside to try and change things. It doesn't change the record. It doesn't change what's happened in British Columbia for the last 10 years. It doesn't change the work I have to do to show the public that there's a positive alternative in this next election. I'm going to stay focused on the work that I have to do, despite the chaos that's going to go on and the divides and the arguments that I'm certain we're going to see on the other side over this next while.
But you don't agree that it makes your job and your life any more difficult now?
It was something that was expected. It certainly wasn't unexpected. I don't think anyone would say it was unexpected for the Premier to step down before the next election. It certainly wasn't unexpected to me.
You mentioned the uncertainty. A party official just told me maybe 7 months before a leadership convention is held. We've seen this happen in the past, but what does that do for the province as a whole?
Well, that's a huge concern. You know, we have been in chaos because of the internal fights in the BC Liberals over this last year. We haven't seen things addressed like the HST. We haven't seen a kickstart to our economy. We haven't seen the government focus on education as they should. I expect all of that will be put aside now while they go through a leadership race, while they jockey for positioning within cabinet, within caucus. And I'm concerned about the uncertainty that creates for our economy in British Columbia and for the people in British Columbia. That's who loses out, unfortunately, if it takes 7 months. Issues and agendas won't get addressed. Things that matter to the people of this province won't get addressed, and that should be a concern for all of us.
Apart from the politics, Carol, the guy had almost 30 years in public life. He's a very adroit politician, very successful. How do you think, what's the lesson that you learn what was the mistake he made? What's the lesson that you learned from him resigning or being forced out of office?
Well, I think the lesson for all politicians is stay connected to the public. I think it's pretty clear that after this election, that the BC Liberals lost connection with the public. They felt they could get away with anything they wanted to do. They felt they could bring in the HST, didn't have to consult the public, didn't have to talk with the public would understand. Well, it's pretty clear, and I think it's a lesson for all politicians. You need to stay connected to the public. You need to make sure that you're listening and working with British Columbians. I think they lost that, the BC Liberals lost that, the Premier lost that, and I think that's the important lesson for everyone.
Do you think that Campbell's resignation will increase calls within your own party for you to step aside so the NDP can have a fresh face?
Well, I've always said as leader of a political party that there are always people who are going to disagree with the direction that you're going. I've always said that I'm looking forward to running against whoever they put up. It's not a surprise to me that we see someone else coming into place now, and I'm looking forward to running against whoever it is. But it'll be even more important for us to be able to provide that voice for the issues that aren't being addressed while this government is going through its leadership race. It'll be even more important for our team to be out there working hard on behalf of the issues that matter to the people of this province. So I'm looking forward to our team getting out there, staying focused, and doing the work that needs to be done to talk about building a strong economy, to talk about how we address environmental concerns, to talk about how we address climate change, how do we address the divide in British Columbia, the rural and urban divide, the issue of child poverty. Those are critical issues on the table today that have to be addressed in British Columbia. The BC Liberals have not done that for the last year. Now they'll be caught up in a leadership race and won't be addressing it. Well, I will, and we will. Our team will be out there working hard to do just that.
Terrell, I don't want to make you try to say nice things about Gordon Campbell, but here's a guy who won 3 elections. His caucus members are all saying he's been one of the best premiers in BC. Could you give an honest assessment of Gordon Campbell's term as premier? Well,
I certainly will give credit to the years he's given to public service. I think that's important for all politicians of all political stripes. It's not an easy role. You give up a lot and your family gives up a lot. So I think it is important to say thank you to Mr. Campbell and to say thank you to his family for 24 years of service. I think that's very critical. I also believe, if I was looking at some positives, that Mr. Campbell has improved the relationships between the federal and provincial government. I think that's good for British Columbians, and that's certainly something that I believe would need to continue. But I also believe that we've seen the record of a more divided province under Mr. Campbell, and I think you can't sweep that away with Mr. Campbell stepping down. We have the highest rate of child poverty. We have the lowest minimum wage. We have the highest cost of living. We have an economy that is struggling. We haven't diversified our economy. We aren't addressing climate change issues and building the new sustainable economy for the future. So those are realities that have to be there. But I certainly thank him for his years of service. I think it's important to thank any politician for that, and certainly the sacrifice his family has given as well.
When you go back to the story we're all familiar with, after the last election, he gets the call, the HST, the decision is on the table in front of him. What do you think motivated him to make what turns out now pretty obviously to have been a bad call that cost him his job?
I think it was pretty clear that the Premier, Mr. Campbell, was not upfront with British Columbians about the budget situation. And he was looking for anything that was going to try and address that budget situation, so he grabbed onto the HST. I have no doubt the conversations were occurring, and we've gone back through the record around the HST. The Premier was not upfront with British Columbians about the HST during the election. He thought he could bring it in, he thought he could ram it through, he thought he could do it without consulting British Columbians, and British Columbians told him otherwise. Pretty clear.
You've been covering the map, but it's obviously the HST that brought about today's announcement, is it?
I think the HST is the straw that broke the camel's back. I don't think it's simply the HST. I think this is a government that lost connections with the people of this province. I think that's pretty clear in everything, as I said, from the minimum wage to environmental and climate change issues. This is a Premier who moved all over the place, who said one day that new relationship with First Nations was important, the next day said climate change was critical, said seniors issues were important, the next day it was children and families. Didn't focus in on addressing the fundamentals that need to be addressed in British Columbia, and I think the people saw through that.